part 2. Let's continue where we left off. Hopefully we won't face any issues. Let's check. Let's see. So the user is going to send all of this information, right? But then the rest of the information will be added by the server, right? All this by the browser itself, it will have all this information, and then the necessary information, and then it's going to be sent to a what is this? The web server, and then it's going to read. The web server is going to get this. You see this? This is the main important part. And remember that we need to they all end. You see that it starts on it starts, so everything starts on a new line. So they all end with the carriage return line feed, right? So they all end with the carriage return line feed. So this is important. Carriage return line feed. If you remember when I talked about carriage return and line feed, I'm not gonna explain that again. The video is going to be unnecessarily long. So a client request consisting of the request line and a few headers can be reduced to only the host name header, right? Is followed by a blank line so that the request ends with a double end of a line, each in here. So each end in the form of a carriage return followed by a line feed. So they all end in a carriage return followed by a line feed. So let's do that. So this is the function that the client is running, basically saying get something. But then you see here, they didn't specify a name of exactly what to get. Usually they're going to run this in full. Basically, how did you get here? We got there because the user ran this command local host, right? A local host. These things now, they're just all over the place. So I do not like. Okay. So local host, still more. Localhost at port what 4321, right? So the user is going to send the command in full, right? So you can ignore this prefix, right? You can ignore that. The main important thing is this, followed by / followed by the name of the file that they want to retrieve. So let's say they want to retrieve africa.jpg, right? So what happens is this whole command, right? When the moment you press the enter button, it gets translated into this. And then the user agent that you're using, which is the browser, it adds all the necessary information needed and then sends it to the web server and tells the web server, listen here, get me this page or get me this file. So it's going to say get followed by followed by the / after the local host and the name of the file. So basically it's going to change this right into this format and say this is going to be a get request, meaning get this file for me, and then followed by the protocol number, HTTP protocol, and it's going to be the 1.1 protocol, right? So / 1.1, and then remember everything ends with the carriage return and line feed. So after running, this is the response that this is what we're going to get, right? After the client is connected, after the client has run that command, this is what is going to be sent via the output stream of the client and received via our input stream. If you remember this diagram, it will be sent via the client's output stream, which is via the browser, right? And send all of that to the input stream. So let's handle that. So let's handle this, right? So we're going to get that, right? So I'm going to obviously read from, let me initialize before I read, let me initialize my buffered reader and output, then print write. So input, right, is equals to new buffered reader, right, which is going to take in an input stream reader, and then we're taking in that input stream. So it's going to be our socket that we communicating to with the client, dot get input stream, right? Like this. So why input stream reader, you might ask. Right, so let me minimize this for now. So why input stream read? So input stream reader, remember what we said, these are bytes. We want to interpret them as primitive data types. So this one that it does, it's sort of like the input stream is sort of like maps each of the bytes to their corresponding character sets, right? So we call that decoding. So it's sort of like decodes. Because if you remember, if you remember ASCII, the char data type, if you remember first semester, if you're watching my videos, I think I did explain it. Yeah, I did explain it. So each number in a computer, each character in a computer is represented by a specific number. For example, capital A, I think it's 65, yeah. And then small letter A is 97, is the integer number 97. So when we talk about bytes, talking about these numbers, but then remember it won't be in an integer, it will be in bytes like zeros and ones. So the process of converting from these zeros and ones to the number to eventually the letter, we call that decoding. And then if you do it vice versa in the opposite direction, so from the number, from the letter to the integer to the binary number, we call that encoding. So this input stream reader, what it does, it decodes the bytes that are being sent. And then obviously we're gonna pass them into a buffered reader. What is the buffered read? If you remember, first semester I did explain the buffer. The buffer, it sort of like helps speed up the process of reading, right? So what do I mean? So the buffer, it's like this, right? Let me do this. So it's like you receive text, you receive something, right? And then it gets stored in the buffer. And then you receive something again, it gets stored in the buffer as chunks, right? And then once it's done, what happens is everything in the buffer, so everything in the buffer, it gets taken out as chunks instead of passing the individual bytes at a time. So instead of passing the individual bytes at a time, we're passing a whole chunk of data, which speeds up the process. So we need to buffer it. So we need to pass it inside the buffer. And then I need to initialize my print writer is equals to new print writer. And then you could, I think there is a buffered. Yeah, there is a buffered write. You could also use a buffered write, but then I don't think that's necessary here. So socket.get output stream, and then we need to auto flash. You could just leave that and then flash every time you send data. So flash, remember we're talking about it uses a buffer, right? Everything in Java uses a buffer. So flash, it means that it makes sure that the data is sent out correctly. So you can imagine this is things, right? They're sitting there and then let me do this. Yeah. So this is the buffer, right? Things are sitting there. And then flash, it means to flash them out. So it should come out here like this and be flashed out so that we can receive more data. So we need to continuously flash, or to make sure, or just to make sure that the data is sent correctly. So flash, after flashing, that means you are sending that data, you're flashing it out of that buffer. So I hope that makes sense. So you could put through there to say auto flash. So flash automatically every time I send out data or I send data via the output stream. You could do that, but then yeah, let's do it. Let's do automatic. Let's say true. I'm going to show you that approach, and then the second approach, I don't think I have to, so we're just going to leave it at that. So we're going to get a request from the client, right? Which is this. So we need to understand, we need to be able to interpret this, right? So what I like to do, right, is I would like to receive that request from the client. So I need to use my input stream, which is this buffered reader. So, oh no, I need to create a string first. String request, right? This is the requests that I get from the client. So I use my input stream. Remember, input stream, this, I check what's inside of my input stream. I just read the line. So dot read line. I read the line inside of my input stream, which should contain this, right? After reading the line in my input stream, now the string has this value. So now we need to do a couple of things to fix the string. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to trim the string. So trim, it means I'm going to use the trim function, meaning that if there's spaces here, or the right, and then there's also spaces there at the end, then I need to delete those spaces. So basically do this, remove that space, and then if there's spaces there, remove that space. So that's what I'm going to do here. So request is equals to request dot trim. It's like you're trimming your edges, right? So there's something important now. So there's two things that I need. I need to get the function. So basically, is it a post or a get or a what? I need to get that function, right? And then I also need to get the file name. And then I also okay, those are the only things I need. I don't need to check the HTTP protocol, but I could check, but then I know for a fact this is a server that runs that runs via an HTTP protocol. So I don't have to double check that. So if you remember in first semester, there's this thing called string tokenizer, if you remember that. But then there's also another approach whereby you can use the split function. Why? Because you see there's spaces here. So I can split when I see a space, then I'm gonna have an array of 1, 2, 3 values, right? Which is going to be this whole thing, yeah. 3 values. But then I only want the first two, which is at index 0 and index 1. But then I'll use the string tokenizer. Okay, let's use that approach because the string tokenizer approach is too common. So string, and then I'm going to say, let me just call it messages. I don't even know what to name it. Is equals to the request string, right? Because remember, the request string it now has this. So that request string, I'm going to split it up whenever I see a space. So the regular expression is going to be split it up when you see the space. So what happens now? Let me show you what happens. So what happens now is this, is that this is going to see a space there, right? See a space and like, oh, split it up. And then it works again. It sees a space there. So there's the space there, right? And then it's going to split it up. So now this is 3 values. This will be at index 0. Because remember, arrays are zero index. Index 1, index 2, and then there we go. So I have all the values that I need. So I can now get the prompt or the method, right? It's called a method. So I can say string method is equals to, I don't have to store it inside, I don't have to store it inside its own variable. I could just use index into the array because I know at what index number. And I even wrote a comment. So I can check the command and say if message is array dot at index 0, and then it's going to be in uppercase, right? But then I like to ignore the cases. So I can say dot equals, right? Ignore case, and then compare it to get, right? Ignoring the case. I don't care the case. if you didn't want to ignore the case, then you have to say dot to lower or dot to upper, and then make sure this string that you're comparing it to is a upper or lower based on the method you used. But in my case, I'm just going to say ignore the case. Just make sure it starts with a G, a E, and a T. I can even do this to show you that it doesn't look at the case. Just make sure it has a combination set of these characters, ignoring the case. But then I will write it in uppercase like this. And then now I know that is that get command. It means that the user wants to get something, right? So there's a set of commands that we need to run, but then before we do that, let's store the file name. So string file. Okay, let's generate a file path, right? Which is the location of where the file is stored, right? Remember that the file is stored inside the data folder, which is Africa dot what. So I'm going to say the data folder / plus, right? Plus what? The file name, which is at index 1. So if I put this / right, what's going to happen? Now it's going to have 2 /. So there's no need for me to put the / here. So I just say data plus messages at index 1. So now I have the file path, right, where the file is located. Then now I can create a new file. Remember the file class, it helps Java to know that to treat this as a file, to know that this is not a string, right? This is not a string. This is a file. So I need to pass it here, the file path. So now I have the path of the file in full. So what is this data plus line doing? It's saying take data string, concatenate it or add it with the name of my file at index 1. So obvious, I'm just going to remove that plus. So basically, it's technically doing this, which is basically this. That's what this line is doing. So that we can say, oh, so the file is found inside data folder, and this is the file. So we have a data folder. Within the data folder, there's this file name. And then now the file name, okay, we have this. Oh, I can do this, right? I can also do this to test before we continue. Like, let me just test. Let me type this out to test if everything is fine, right? So I'm going to say file name. Just output the file name to see if it is indeed receiving the request from the client. So I'm going to run it. So now my server is running at port 431. And then, okay, let me, I want to pin this. Okay, let me do this because now this thing at the top is giving me a problem. So now when I run this command, right, this one here, when I press enter, our output should output the file name, which is basically everything after the, or including the, yeah, including the / after the port number. So it should output the file name that the user wants. So let's test it out. So let's check here. Perfect. There's the file name as I told you, as expected. So there's the file name. So we are sure that even our code, right, we did implement it perfect. We're actually getting the file name. So now, after getting the file name, yeah, this is interesting. So after getting the file name, we can now, there's something that we need, right? Remember, we need to read the contents of this file. And the same way, the same concept that we had here of streams, right? I need to use what we call a file input stream. So file input stream, right? File in, right? I'm just going to call it file in. It's equals to file input stream like this, right? And then we take in that file. To read the contents, be able to read the contents of that file, right? But then we also need to buffer. Remember, the concept of buffering is very important to store so that it makes the speed and everything efficient. So I'm going to say buffered input. I think it's we're gonna use buffered input stream if I'm not mistaken. Buff in is equals to new buffered input stream. Okay, so now since I'm passing it here, I don't need to declare it. I just say new file stream and then come on. Yeah, there we go. Right. So that now we can refer to the files in the buffer, right? We can refer to the file via the buffer. And then we have this, and then now I need I think I did something wrong. Yes, I think I did something wrong, but then let's see. Because remember we need to send out bytes here. So yeah, we need to send out bytes. So yeah, we need to fix that. But then I think there should be a right, yeah. So output, let me check my print writer. I think my print writer has a function to write bytes. Dot write um writes an array of character. This method is inherited from the class buff array. I hope this works. Yeah, I hope this works. Yeah, because we need to write the, let's just double check our commands, right? So if everything went fine, right? If the user was able to connect well, I think this should be there. And then all of this need to be there. We can some things we can actually neglect, right? Like the e tag. I don't know what e tag should we say is there. So the e tag is used to determine if cached version. Yeah, you see, e tag you should usually like not include that. Don't include the e tag. So since we are writing it in bytes, right? And we are writing primitive types in bytes, right? Listen to this. Remember when you're talking about the data output and all that. Now I need to make use of data output stream, right? And then I'm just going to call it out. And then I'm going to say out, right? I need to link it to my socket, right? So it's equals to new data output stream. So I think we're going to actually use the data output stream. In our case, let me see, does this one take in? Okay, this one doesn't take in. Okay, so with the print writer, remember, we only use it if we have to send send what a string to the other side. Here we're not sending a string, so I really don't need it there. But then I just might, never know. But then I don't. Oh, okay, yeah, I remember. I'm thinking about it. I might need that. So let me check. Let me just check out dot write bytes. Yeah. So there's a string method called write bytes. So we can use that to write bytes, right? Because if you check in in the explanation, they did tell you that it's the indicated length in its bytes and blah blah blah, right? So we're actually sending out data in terms of bytes. So we need to write out all those strings in bytes. So there's a function called write bytes, which takes a string and then it writes it as a byte to that client, right? So we're going to start by sending this. And remember, everything is terminated with the carriage return and the line feed. So I'm going to copy. Okay, let me do this. So remember, some tags, some things are not going to include. I'm going to do this, and then where's that? Uh, uh, now I'm doing other things now. Okay, where's the? Where did I see that part? I forgot. So let me just do this. It's fine. Uh, what's that? Technically, we could. I mean, we could. We could. Let's do this, right? I'll do it in a different way, right? You can do it in whatever way you want to do it. There's many ways to kill a cat. You can do this line by line, right? And say, start here. We're sending this, right? So I'm going to copy that as it is. Copy it as it is. And then I'm going to use my data output stream and say dot write bytes. Yeah. And then the bytes that I'm writing, basically it's a string. And then remember, it needs to end with the carriage return and the line feed. So I can do that, right? And then I keep doing that line by line. I keep doing that. Or I can just string buffer. I can do that also. There's many ways to do it. So let's just do it this way if you prefer doing that way. So now I need to write the date. Not every information is necessary. Yeah, just write the information you're able to write. So I just call the parameterless constructor from the date class. That should initialize it to the current date. Okay, it tends to do this. So let me say date, close to new date. And then let me import it. It's java.util, no? Yeah, I forgot which class, so that's fine. I just wanted to import it because it was refusing to import. So this plus new date plus, remember the carriage return and the line feed. We need to add them. And then content type, it depends. The content type, right, depends on the content type depends on what you are sending out, right? Remember, we want to retrieve an image. So for us, I totally forgot what it's called. There's a term for this thing, but then let me search it. For the content type, like what specific message you should add if it's an image. So I forgot what it's called. Content type for images. Yeah, MIME types. They're called MIME types. Yeah, so you should go to this website. This is it's quite useful. So where's that? There should be a table here if I'm mistaken, but then it's fine. So these are the different MIME types, right? So we are dealing with the JPEG, which is this one. So I need to say image or JPEG, or I can say image or JPG, still the same JPEG. So I'll just use this one, image or JPEG. But then let me see, there should be a table. Did they? Okay, that's fine. Let me do this. Let me search it proper way now. MIME types. Okay, I think this is the one that I once visited. Yeah. So just search MIME types. So you see there's a table here. Extension is what the file extension, and then the MIME type, how are you going to name it in your code? So I have a JPEG, so I need to go to the J's this side. So there's the JPEG, right? So you see, this is the MIME type for the JPEG. So I need to use that there. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to say image or JPEG, right? And then character set, yeah, let's keep it at UTF-8. And then content length, the length of the file, which is this file. So you're going to say, you're going to write, and then it needs to be in bytes, remember? Come on. The write bytes. And then I need to copy content length string and put it there, space, plus, hey, before I forget, carriage return line feed. Don't forget those two things. And then we need to output the content length, the file length, right? So I'm going to say file dot, there should be a length here, the length of the file, right? And then plus the carriage return and line feed to move to the next line. And then last modified, I can still just put in a date, but then I don't think it's necessary. The server is basically the server's name, right? I could send the server there, but then I don't see the need. And then acceptable ranges, you could put it's bytes, obviously. This one will always be bytes. You could do that, right? So let me see, there should be a function called inet, a class called inet address. Oh, it's if I remember very well, the inet address, right, is to get information about the host, right? So, which is getting the host and all those information, right? So let me see, get host by name. Okay, I don't want to get the host, so I'm the host, right? So I can say, I can literally write anything, right? But then I'm just going to leave it like that. I won't, yeah, I guess these pieces of data, right? These pieces of information, I won't add them, right? This connection just means that the connection is closed once it's done. This is just acceptable, accept ranges, bytes. I could, the accept ranges, I could write it, right? Out dot write. But my main point is that you don't have to. This is just information that, extra information that you are sending about the server, right? Bytes, carriage return, line feed. So once we are done here, remember there's something very important once we are done. If you look at, after we've displayed all of this information, right, there's something very important, which is what? This space here. So after I've moved to the next line, okay, I think connection close. I don't know about connection close. Let's just put connection close. I'm not sure if it means that the connection is closed or it's actually us writing. Will it there? Let me just add it. And then yeah, this is just information that you choose which one you want to add. I'll add the connection close, but then the by etag server last modified, I won't add them. And then remember that line here, there's a space here. So we're going to say carriage return line feed after the connection close statement, right? So therefore it's going to move here to the next line. And then we need to leave this line empty and then move to the next line, then followed by my content in bytes. So I need to output that new line. So out dot write bytes, and then carriage return new line feed. Then there we go. That's the empty line, right? This line. And then now we need to we need to send the write the bytes, right? So basically we need to send the file to the client in bytes, right? So how do we do that? How do we send the file in bytes? So to send the file in bytes, important thing to the first thing that we need to have is the byte array, right? Which is going to act as our buffer. Remember when we talked about the buffer here. So we are creating our own buffer and we're going to give it a size. So the buffer of this size is equals to new buffer. Let's make it 2048, right? New int, I mean, what am I saying? New byte, I mean, not buff. And then int n is equals to 0. Let me just say int size. This is size of bytes written, right? This is what it means, but then I'm just gonna call it bytes, right? Let me call it bytes. Size of bytes, no, size of bytes read, right? Let me not mix it up. This is the size of bytes read. So what we're going to do, right? We're gonna read from this buffer, this buffered input stream, and store in our own buffer the bytes. After storing the bytes in our own buffer, we send them back. We send them to the client, right? Because remember this, even though this is viewed in this way, it's for us to be able to read it. But then this is actually in bytes. So we need to do the same and write it out in bytes. So how do we do that? We're going to, so what happens when you are reading from the buffer, right? What happens when you're reading from the buffer? So, wait, do I need to, I don't think I need to say, I don't think I need to use a buffered input stream here. I think I can just use the file input stream. Yeah, because if I use the buffer here, yeah, let me just use the file input stream because I have to pass it in my own buffer, not this buffer. So let me just leave it like this, right? File, file, let me call it fin, right? So this is the file input stream. Let me not put it in I made a mistake here. I shouldn't have created my own buffer. Like I shouldn't have used the default buffer because I'm going to use my own buffer and write it byte by write it byte by byte, right? Using this buffer. So what happens when you're reading from the buffer? So when you're reading from the buffer, it returns the bytes that you've read. If you're reading from the file input stream, my bad. If you're reading from the file input stream, it returns the bytes that you've read from the file input stream. And then eventually when you reach the end, when you reach the end of the file stream or let me just say the input stream, right? Remember you are reading. When you reach the end of the input stream, it returns a -1. So that means every time when you read from the file input stream, we'll get a value greater than 0, right? Basically, because the bytes are going to be greater than 0, obvious. Because they're going to be 2048 of them, right? At a time. And then which is greater than 0. And then when it reaches the end, we should get a negative number. So we can use that to our advantage and say, while we haven't reached the negative number or we haven't reached the end. So how do we do that? I can say while I'm reading, right? So while the bytes read, let me say bytes read. These are the bytes that we've read from the file stream. How do I read them? I take my file input stream and call the .read function, which reads a byte at a time. So that byte at a time that I'm reading, I'm going to store it inside my buffer. Obviously, this function will return some value, the bytes read from the file stream, right? Which is going to be greater than 0. So while this is greater, I can can do it in two ways. I can say, well, this is greater than zero. That means there's still I'm still reading bytes, right? Or I can say while this is not equals to -1, then read the bytes. Then I'll use a print writer. We're going to use that print writer now. So I'm going to say, so you see here, I set the auto flash to true. Right, there's the auto flash. I set it to true. There's the auto flash. I set it to true. So I don't have to flash. But then if you feel like you don't trust it, then you can do that. You can you can do that. You can, what is this? If you feel like, what is it? If you feel like, what is this? If you feel like you don't trust the method, I just got lost in my train of thought. If you feel like you don't trust this approach, you can just remove that and then make sure every time you make use of the print writer, you flash every time. So let me show you the two approaches. This is the first approach. I'm going to now use my print writer and write. I'm going to need this function that takes in a buffer and a starting point and the maximum number of bytes that I need to write. So there we go. Obviously, the buffer array is that one, buffer. Okay, I forgot to put something here. I'm supposed to pass in the buffer. I forgot to pass the buffer there. So I'm going to read, write, and then store into the buffer. I'm going to read bytes and then store them into the buffer. Then this function, this calculation here will return the number of bytes that I've read from this file input stream. From the file input stream, which is basically from this file, which is important. And then it's going to take in the buffer and the starting point, which is 0, and the stopping point, which is going to be the bytes read. Um, uh, am I using the wrong function? Output dot write character position of, is it this one? But yeah, this should work, right? Mm. So let me see. What am I missing here? Because you're gonna have to write bytes here, and then am I missing? What am I missing? Because the function is fine. You have to create a buffer. That's fine. Am I using the method wrong? The method writers of type print write is not applicable to the arguments. Yeah, I understand. So let me say that right. Mm, let me just double check. Buff an array of characters of which is a starting point to write the buffer length, the number of characters to write. Then if okay, it's not the buffer. I think I should pass in the file input stream. Is it the file input stream? No, it's not. What's the first argument again? Mm, write bytes. What am I missing here? Mm, Let me see. Okay, there's still a bit of time. What am I missing? Because now all I'm left is to write the bytes, right? Which is, let me just double check here, which is the content of the file, right? Or I should use, but then this is the right function. Or maybe I'm using the wrong one. Oh, right. Yeah, I'm using the wrong one. My bad. I'm using the wrong one. I need to use the data one, data output stream. I mean, so we're taking the buffer, the bytes offset starting point. It needs to start from zero always. Remember, arrays are zero and index, right? And then stopping point. Where should you stop writing? Which is the length of the bytes that have been read from the file input stream. And then once we are done here, we need to also say out dot write bytes and end with the carriage return line feed. If I'm not mistaken, let me see. Yeah, we should end with the carriage return and line feed. So let me see. Content type specifies the media, internet media type, which is the MIME type. Let me just double check the MIME type. Um, Okay, there's also a link there. You can use that link. You see, it shows you all the different MIME types. The image is JPEG, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, so that's the only thing we need to change. I think it should work, but then let's test it out and see. Mm, okay, bytes read. Okay, fine, fine, fine. Let's just see. Let's run it and then try to retrieve the page. So localhost 4321 / it's called Africa.jpg. So there we go. There's the image. Yeah, I was just some few issues there. I was just using the wrong, you see here, I was using the wrong function. That's why I couldn't, I was like, okay, where's the bytes? Blah, blah. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. So just remember, okay, so we didn't actually need this. Yeah, we didn't need that. So let me see. Does this one have, it also has the flash method. So they just put it there just to be safe and flash. So I'm gonna put that there and flash just to be safe. So I ended up not using the print writer because like I said, it's only based with if you're working with strings. Here I'm working with bytes, which is bytes. There's nothing more I can explain or add to that. So that should be pretty much it. Let me refresh. Oh, okay, my server is not running, that's why. Remember, in order for the client to connect, you see it's not running. In order for the client to connect, the server must be running. So you see, now it's running. Then we retrieve that information. So this is actually how the internet works. So when you go to the internet and looking for an image or information or whatever, it's actually stored on another computer. And all you're doing is just connecting to that computer, that IP address. Basically, you'll use a host name, right? Instead of the actual IP address, you use the host name. So that's pretty much it for this practical. This is pretty much what you have to do. You're going to have to write the bytes because remember what he said, it works with bytes. Like that's why I was even using write bytes function, even though I'm passing a string there, because that's how it works. It accepts bytes, nothing more. And yeah, I feel like that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. So I will upload the code, then you can just start from there. And remember that with your practical, you need to have, what is this? You need to have multi-threading, right? And you need to create a server class, right? A server class, not the way I did it. I just put it all here. That's that's all I did. And please don't try to copy the code exactly as it is, because what's the point? What's even the point of coding if you're just copying? Because you're gonna need to write semester test two, and I won't be there. You'll be alone. So you can use string tokenizer also. It also have you can use that. There's many ways to do this. Like the equals, you see the equals ignore case. I could have, first things first. Remember, I'm accessing at index zero, right? I could have said message at index zero. Okay, my battery. Let me plug my charger. I could have said message at index zero, right? And I said is equals to message at index zero dot two messages. Messages, right? Dot to lower case. And then after saying dot to lower case, I can just say is equals. I don't have to, I have to actually look at the case. It's important here in this way. Obviously, I'm going to use smaller letters because I've converted that first index to a lowercase. And then there we go. And then I'm going to run my server. Obviously, it needs to be running. So run the server. And then the client is going to make a request. And then there we go. We get the page. And then it retrieves back this information. So that's pretty much it about we end up using data upstream. Why? Because we need to write bytes. Remember what I said, print write is useful when you're writing strings, when you're receiving strings and writing strings. That's when things like buffered read and print write are applicable. Buffered reader, we could use it because we are receiving a string. So yeah, all the best with your practical. I'll add the link in the description of the video.